Alright, so I'm in the Miata, traveling at night, and I probably shouldn't do like in the dark videos because you can't even see my face. And as I get farther out of town, you'll see even less probably. But you know, when I got something on my mind, I gotta speak it out, and so that's just the way it is. You know, just feel like a podcast and just listen. You don't have to see me talk, honestly, it's just my face. Right, and the Miata's a little noisier than my Titan truck, so sorry about that. I do have a microphone system, but I don't always have it with me. And when an idea strikes, it strikes. Okay, so I've been talking about, there's a couple other videos about this idea of the limits, like the cosmic horizon or the particle horizon, which is the idea that there are parts of the universe that we can never see, and that basically, you know, our source of knowledge about the physical universe is defined by a bubble, and that's a bubble that's it's kind of expanding, but it's also contracting at the same time. In the sense that, yeah, there are going to be a few things that we're going to see in the future we haven't seen yet, but there's also the very real, distinct possibility that there are other things that are expanding away from us at faster than the effective speed of light, so we'll never be able to see them. So in other words, to us, the universe that we can know is a bubble that goes, it's about 18.3 billion years in extent. Light years, right? Because it's the light that transmits the information. So that's the limit to what we can know about the universe. There might be more universe out there. It's very likely that there's more universe out there. I mean, what are the chances that the entire universe is defined by the bubble that just so happens to be visible from where we are? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that just doesn't seem likely. So it's a very good possibility that we're just seeing our little bubble of the universe. And I referred to it before as, you know, think of a bowling ball, and inside the bowling ball there's a golf ball, or I think it was a ping pong ball, but I'm sure the scale's off, but I'm just the idea, right? Like, to us, the universe is the visible universe. It's nothing more than that. We have no information outside of the visible universe. Nothing. Zero. That is forever our universe. We will never know more about it than that. Oof. Truck on the side of the road. Gotta make sure I don't get into trouble here. Okay, looking good, looking good. Okay, there we go. I'm past the danger zone. Okay, so that was a couple of videos I spent on that. Now, here's another mind-blowing thing, and I'm honestly just giving you this as I discover it. And I'm, in a sense, rediscovering these concepts as an atheist, because I used to be a Christian for my whole life, and I had some ideas of what the universe was about. And I realize now that I had kind of like imbibed some kind of understanding from, you know, the latest science, picked up ideas here and there. But then I had kind of like just automatically and without realizing it, I had, you know, contextualized those into the package of ideas that were copacetic with, you know, my understanding of what Christianity was. And so this, you know, like, if you think that God created the universe, it kind of follows naturally. I mean, you might not say this out loud, but it follows naturally that you would think that we can probably know all of the universe because, you know, God made it for us. That, you know, that's the idea. And so it's there for us to discover. And, you know, this is subtle. Like, it's not like a knockdown, drag out argument. It's not like any definitive, but it's just like themes, you know, and just ideas. And, you know, maybe even subconscious premises. And so, as a Christian, you look out at the universe and you think, see how we discovered everything about the universe? Well, that was there for us to discover. Wow, that kind of proves God because, you know, He made the universe to be discoverable to us. But it turns out that's actually not the case. We don't know what is out there. We just don't know. And according to the, like, status of physics as we know it today, we probably can never know the full extent of the universe. And I just find that mind-boggling. Okay, but today, so that's just like a review, things that we've discussed in the past. As for the current thing I'm into, is okay, think of it as two limits, two sets of limits. One is the limit about the physical extent. That's what I've been talking about. But the other is the limit of how far back in time can we extrapolate about the origins of the universe? How far back can we go? And there's a lot of misconceptions surrounding this. Okay, so I talked about how, sorry, I think I might have some hiccups coming on. So I talked about how the Big Bang is like misnamed. It's not really a Big Bang. It's more like the universe expanded, and the expansion of dimensional space then had consequences for the material that was inside space, right? So it's like a bounded, you could think of it as a circle or a marble or some kind of rounding if you wanted to, if that helps. Not that we're really, like, I don't think that's really relevant, but it might help just to imagine it that way. So before the Big Bang, space is tightly compressed, and then it expands like very rapidly. Space, it just expands like bam, 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 like in seconds. It just goes massive. There's a hiccup. Wow, I'm so unprofessional. And so the universe expands out, and in that expansion, the energy that is in the universe, the matter and the energy, it responds a certain way to that expansion, and that's the Big Bang. Okay, so don't think of it as something blew up and it made the universe, dimensional space expand. No, it's the other way around. Dimensional space expands, and that has implications for what is inside of it. And I think it's fair to imagine, you know, if you just compress something super tight, it's going to be like hot and dense. And then when you give it more room, it's going to naturally, since there's a lot of pressure, it's going to naturally expand out, right? And it does it like in a second or so, 2 seconds or just a few seconds. Bam, there's the universe. But it's all a response to the expansion of dimensional space, right? It's not an explosion that leads space to expand. Space itself is expanding. And we don't know why space expanded. There's ideas, blah, 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 but we don't know, okay? Now, here's the thing I want to really bring home, is most people that are like acquainted with these ideas, especially if you have a Christian background, they think of the Big Bang as the beginning of the universe. In fact, this is not really something that we can say. We don't know what happened before the expansion of dimensional space. But of course, it's just natural if you are, you know, if you come from a background in which you understand that God created, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, you have this natural assumption that there was a beginning, and somebody tells you, oh, you know what, there was a time when the universe expanded very rapidly. You're just going to assume that that was the beginning, and the science discovered that 13.8 billion years ago the universe began. Now, in a sense, it did. We could say it's like the end of the world as we know it. It's the universe as we know it. Yes, certainly began 13.8 billion years ago when dimensional space expanded very rapidly. But as for what happened before that, we don't know. We don't know if that was like right after a beginning, or if that compressed matter was around forever, or if dimensional space is on a schedule where it expands and it contracts for some reason. We don't know. We just don't know. And of course, if you have some kind of a bias, especially a religious bias, that is meaningful and that, exerts control over a whole bunch of different parts of your brain and your thinking, then you're going to go, oh, well, that was the beginning. But there's actually no reason to say that. We just don't know. And so this is where the term singularity comes in. So briefly before the Big Bang, we get into what is called the singularity. And the singularity is basically just a word that we use to describe when all our math, all our calculations, all our knowledge of physics just breaks down. Because matter becomes so dense and so compressed that we just don't know the rules. And our rules about how space currently operates, if you apply them to that situation, which, we're fairly certain that situation existed, but if you apply them to that situation, everything just goes wacky. Like the machine just goes, cannot compute, right? Just nothing. And it's not that, it's just that the equations don't make sense. They return nonsense. They just return nonsense. So the singularity is it's a state of matter, but really more what it's saying is it's a state of knowledge, right? Because it's that our knowledge stops at the singularity. All the well-crafted observations and arguments and formulas that we have that describe space-time as it currently is, we can go back to within a few minutes before the Big Bang, or seconds, I don't know what it is exactly. Very brief amount of time. And then after a certain point, nothing makes sense. And so you can see where I'm going with this, right? Because I was talking about how the limits of our knowledge end at the cosmic horizon, or the particle horizon. They also end here at the singularity, right? We can't deduce anything beyond the singularity, because the state of matter is so esoteric that we just have nothing to go on. And we can't reproduce that state of matter to try to figure it out, because it's it's unique. It's a singularity. It's sui generis. There's nothing like it. So we can't experiment it. We just don't know. And so it becomes, again, a limit to knowledge, right? So all we can say is, if we, deduce from the current state of the universe, the deductions we can make only take us to a few moments before the Big Bang. And that's it. After that, all bets are off. It's like a veil. It's a huge curtain that, so I'm not going to say somebody, it's like a huge curtain across our knowledge. We can't see beyond this. And it's hard to imagine any kind of future situation in which we would be able to see beyond it, because it would take magic in terms of our understanding of the universe. It would take magic to understand what that was. And I know people are but see, that's where God comes in. And I gotta say, no, that is not where God comes in. Just because you stop understanding something, you can't just insert imagination. I mean, you can insert an imagination, but please call it imagination. Don't pretend that some invented notion about a deity, which has no evidence in the current universe, can be the solution to that space where human knowledge stops. What? That's just a weird it's just a wacky imagination of the ancients that there were gods. That's it. There's nothing more to it. So why would you insert that at the end of hard-fought, well-thought-through, experimented upon, actual physical knowledge? It's just the end of knowing. So if you, as a Christian, and I'm just, in some ways speaking to my former self, think, oh, look, modern cosmology is kind of congruent with a Christian view of the universe in some way, because modern cosmology posits a Big Bang as a beginning to the universe, and so does the Bible. The Bible says that God created everything at one point in time. If that's what you think, like, it's just not warranted, right? Because it's not. Physics does not tell us that there was a point at which the universe began. It tells us that there was a point at which the universe expanded. That's all it tells us. It doesn't tell us what happened before that. For all we know, the compressed universe was sitting around for gazillions and gazillions of years, Googleplex number of years or whatever, or maybe time was meaningless because the highly compressed nature of that early universe, or who the fuck knows? Nobody knows, okay? And you can't solve I don't know by saying God. That's just saying I don't know in different words. That's all it's doing. It's doing nothing more than that, because nobody understands God. Nobody understands where he came from, or how he could. I know Christians say that he existed forever. Nobody understands what that means either. So when you say, oh, look, it's the limits of our knowledge, that's where God comes in. All you're saying is, oh, look, it's the limits of our knowledge. That's where the limits of our knowledge come in. And it's just a label you're putting on something. It has no answers. Like, it doesn't explain anything. It just offers an explanation that itself has no explanation. So, you just put off the explanation one step further as though that solves something. It doesn't, because an eternally existing being doesn't make any sense either. So what the fuck? Just like, at some point you just gotta go, I don't know. And I think I just find it fascinating that physics tells us there's a point at which we don't know. It's not the beginning of the universe. It is, if you want to, and there's an analogy for this, for the cosmic horizon, and I'll get to it. So, if you want to say it's the beginning of the universe as we know it, I think that's fair. And that's kind of like saying we are at the center of the universe that we can observe, right? It's kind of the same thing. Like, you're saying something that is true, but it's not as, significant as it might sound, right? We don't know. And to say we don't know, therefore God, is like saying, we don't know, therefore we know. You see what I'm saying? Like, all you're doing is inserting some imagined thing wherever knowledge fails. But we have to be able to say, as human beings, there are limits to knowledge. I mean, we should already know this. There are limits to knowledge all around us. We can't know everything. But if you believe in God, then you think, oh, and I'm not saying that this is like an explicitly crafted argument. I'm just saying, like, it's a presupposition, or even a presumption. If God knows everything, then there's the possibility that I could know everything, right? Because I'm in touch with God, so he could tell me shit. And so you see how that sneaks in there. And so we develop the idea, without thinking about it, that there are no theoretical limits to human knowledge. But in fact, there are theoretical limits to human knowledge. So that's my big revelation, for tonight. I hope it makes sense. And I'm going to go back to driving.